This is WEFT Champaign, 90.1 FM, community radio for East Central Illinois. Streaming live at www.weft.org. The views and opinions expressed here are those of the speakers and do not necessarily represent those of WFT, its board of directors, associates, its station manager, or Prairie Air Incorporated. The following program is pre-recorded and consists of two parts. The first part is a rebroadcast of a program first aired in 2011. The second part was recorded on April 24th, 2015. Welcome to Weekend Heartbeat. I'm Shaun David, and this is a new lamp.
New lamp for old. New lamp for old. Remember how Aladdin headed out to get oil for his mother's old dented, tarnished lamp? And in the market he met a magician calling out these words. This strange man was offering to give him a brand new shiny lamp for his old one. That's what I want to offer you, if you'll have it. A new lamp of spiritual guidance. But maybe you already have such a lamp, which still burns brightly. Great! You are still welcome to join us simply to learn who we are. But maybe your lamp of divine guidance has gotten dented and tarnished like Aladdin's. Or perhaps you have no such lamp at all. To you, I offer a new lamp. Hi, my name is Marilyn. Welcome to A New Lamp, a program designed to make you acquainted with the Bahá'í religious faith. I hope you will choose to spend the next few minutes with me. Thanks.
From the cold black cavern of misery his diamond light did shine. Exiled cruelly the nature of divinity, golden wings took flight. Baghdad claimed the cradle of eternity from the start of time. He perched upon its portals and its passages, eyes like molten fire. I am the royal falcon on the arm of the Almighty. I unfold the drooping wings of every broken bird and started on its flight. Gazing round at discord and division, he tried to set it right. Bore the brunt of poison and derision, appealing to the sky. Arrows of callousness and jealousy were fired on every side. The time had come to fly off and retire unto the mountain heights. I am the royal falcon on the arm of the Almighty. I unfold the drooping wings of every broken bird and started on its flight. Like a beacon of light, like an eagle who flies. hilltops and the valleys, contemplating no return, until a small child far off in the township cried for his father. Tears they soared high up into the heavens across the clouds of night. They reached him where he stood upon the mountain, pain cut like a knife. I am the royal falcon on the arm of the Almighty. I unfold the drooping wings of every broken bird and started on its flight. I am the royal falcon on the arm of the Almighty. I unfold the drooping wings of every broken bird and started on its flight. Light, a beacon of light, light. An eagle he flew to his side.
Well, here we are again with Baha'u'llah still in the Black Pit. Though many expected him to perish there, he did survive, but bore the scars from the chains on his neck for the rest of his life. We may wonder how he came to escape death when so many had perished. He was highly esteemed by people of both high and low degree who would oppose such an act on the government's part. There was an attempt to poison him while he was in the Siakal. When there was no proof of complicity on his part in the attempt on the Shah's life, his persecutors had no choice but to release him, weak and confined to his bed to recuperate. He had 1 month for he and his family to prepare for exile, never to return to the land of his birth again. And so he, his family, and followers journeyed to Baghdad in the dead of winter from January 12th to April 8th, 1853. A house was rented in the old part of town. Among the exiles was his half-brother, who he had raised after their father's death. Yahya was ambitious but cowardly, and was encouraged by an accomplice to make a claim to be the one that the Bab had chosen to be his successor. This caused much disturbance among the Babis. As Baha'u'llah's prestige arose among the city officials, Yahya's jealousy grew. Baha'u'llah chose to leave Baghdad and retired to the mountains of Kurdistan, where he dwelt alone for 2 years until his family finally found him and begged him to return. The plight of the Babis under Yahya's leadership was not good. They were disheartened, poor, and their faith weakened. Upon Baha'u'llah's return, things improved, and Baha'u'llah lived in Baghdad for 7 years. The Sultan, head of the Ottoman Empire in Turkey, requested he be transferred to Constantinople, which is now Istanbul. So many people came to see him prior to his leaving their area that the house could not contain them. So Baha'u'llah rented a rose garden on the other side of the Tigris River and pitched his tent there for 12 days, where everyone could come to bid him farewell. During these 12 days, he made public that he was the one, the promised one, the one whom God would make manifest. April 21st through May 2nd is celebrated by Bahá'ís as the festival of Rizwan. Rizwan means paradise and is what Baha'u'llah called the garden. Roses were piled high in his tent and the nightingales sang through the night. The day arrived for his departure, 70 souls in all. What the Sultan had expected to be a shameful departure became a triumphant one as he rode away on a red roan, with the guards acting more as a guard of honor. A 12-day journey took them to Constantinople, and after 4 months they were sent even further to Adrianople, where they stayed 4.5 years. Unexpectedly, the Sultan had them moved to Palestine, Baha'u'llah to Akka, and Yahya to Cyprus. This was in 1868. We will study the latter years of his life next week.
Gathered now at the mystic hour in the garden of Bresvan, circling around his blessed tent in the garden of Bresvan, and the nightingales sing, and the souls are on fire, as the crimson-colored ark sets sail in the presence of the best beloved of the world. Garden of Bresvan. The fragrance of the rose is strong in the garden of Bresvan. The friends are silent, struck with awe in the garden of Bresvan, as the Ancient of Days lifts a myriad veils of light, and the new creation sings with joy in the presence of the best beloved of the world. In the garden of Bresvan. Lord of names ascends his throne in the garden of Bresvan. Would you now and quaff your fill in the garden of Bresvan? Everlasting life from the hands of his grace, bestowed upon all humankind in the presence of the best beloved of the world.
My captivity can bring on me no shame. Nay, by my life it conferreth on me glory. That which can make me ashamed is the conduct of such of my followers as profess to love me, yet, in fact, follow the evil one. They, indeed, are of the lost. Baha'u'llah. Thanks so much for being with me this morning. I hope you have found a blessing during these few minutes. If you want to learn more about the Baha'i religion, you can go online to www.bahai.us. To contact me, my email address is anewlamp@yahoo.com. Thanks, and have a great day. Welcome to the New Lamp. We have the good fortune today to have a very special guest in Francis Worthington, who is an author as well as a Baha'i. Our guests are usually from the local community, but we were able to take advantage of the fact that Francis is in town for a family occasion. Francis, welcome.
Well, I'm so glad to be here.
Well, it's a real treat for us to have you here today.
Good to meet you, Francis.
Well, Shaun, I'm glad to meet you too. I must say, I was a DJ in college, and so radio has always been dear to my heart. So I'm thrilled you guys have a radio program.
We're having a lot of fun with it. Before we go on to discuss the books you've written, can you fill us in a little bit about yourself? Let the listeners learn a little bit about who you are, family background, whatever you feel inclined to tell us.
Well, sure. I'm a grandmother. I have to start with that. Which, of course, means I'm also a mother. My husband and I had 2 children, and then our daughter has 2 sons, she and her husband, so that makes me the grandmother that I am today. A lot of fun bringing up children, I think, all the way along, both the children and the grandchildren. But I went to college at Duke University, met my husband there. Then I got a master's in library science and put him through medical school, and he's still a practicing cardiologist. So that's a little of our background. We live in South Carolina.
Ah, that's great.
It's a great state.
You know, you talk with such joy about your grandchildren. Somebody gave me a pillow one time that said, if I had known his grandchildren were so much fun, I'd have had them first.
There is something in that.
We have noticed as we have guests in that, and well, actually, I've noticed as I have met Baha'is over the years, there are so many interesting stories about how people became Baha'is. For Shaun, he grew up in a Baha'i family. For me, I never heard of the faith until I was 70 years old. Can you tell us a little bit about your Baha'i history?
Well, sure. I think I probably have more in common with Shaun because I grew up in a Baha'i family. My parents became Baha'is before they met, which was in the late 1930s. My mother was originally from right here in Champaign-Urbana, went to Urbana High School, but then she went to New York to study cello and do some acting, and that's where she really began studying the Baha'i faith and became a Baha'i. And her mother also joined the Baha'i faith shortly after that, and later on her sister, Portia Smith, who recently died here in Champaign-Urbana, which is, of course, is why I'm here for a memorial service.
Right.
So there are a number of Baha'is then on that side of the family. And then, as I said, my father had become a Baha'i. He was living in Boston at the time, and through a family friend became a Baha'i. So by the time I was born in 1946, they had been Baha'is for several years and, of course, began raising me as a Baha'i. Sure. But by the time I got to high school, I began questioning, as kids do, whether or not this was something I really wanted to believe in for the rest of my life. And of course, Baha'is are encouraged to do independent investigation of truth.
Absolutely.
So I decided to take that pretty seriously, and I thought, really, my life would be easier, too, if I weren't a Baha'i, because it's difficult to be something that's an extreme minority. And it was a super extreme minority when I was in high school because there were only about 10,000 Baha'is in the United States, and there were no other Baha'is in the small town in Tennessee where we lived. In fact, some of my friends' parents had forbidden my friends to talk to me because I was a Baha'i. But luckily, they were courageous enough to say, well, no, that's ridiculous. We're going to talk to you anyway. Right. So I was not ostracized, which I'm very thankful for because I do know of other people who were ostracized in small towns simply because their parents belonged to a strange religion. But I began studying the Baha'i faith, and the more I studied, the more I fell in love with it, the more I couldn't see any other answer that made sense.
Yes.
And so that's when I decided to sign a card that says I wanted to be part of the Baha'i community. I was 16 at that point in time, and now I'm a good bit older. But that's my story.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. So you have written a book called Abraham, One God, Three Wives, and Five Religions. How did you come about writing this book?
Well, embarrassingly, it started with a question that I could not answer. And the question came from a 14-year-old. He was in a class I was teaching about different religions and asked me some complicated detail about the lineage of Muhammad, which I couldn't answer at that point. And so I went home and looked it all up, tried to make a chart of what he wanted to know, came back the next week and figured that was it. But it turned out that wasn't it, because somebody else had heard me giving the explanation and invited me to come and do a class on that very topic for the adults.
Oh, my.
I know, that was a bit of a surprise. Oh, wow. So I did that class, and again, figured I was done. But a few weeks later, a speaker did not show up at an Interfaith Forum meeting. Now, I was chair of the Interfaith Forum in Greenville, South Carolina at that point in time, and I thought, oh goodness, people have showed up, and now our speaker is not coming. She had gotten mired down in the fog in the mountains as she was coming toward Greenville, and so she wasn't going to make it on time. So I desperately said, well, look, here's what I've learned lately about the lineage of Abraham and how it relates to the Baha'i faith. So it might be something interesting. So I did 15 minutes just to do a program. And again, thought that was it. But afterwards, a rabbi asked me a very difficult question that, again, I couldn't answer. So I began researching it. And then somebody asked me to give an hour lecture at a festival of faith. So really, I was pushed into the book by friends and friends of other religions, because for the most part, except for the first question, the ones that pushed me to learn more, to answer more, were Jews and Christians and a couple of Muslims who really wanted me to justify what I was finding out and to relate it in a way that they could understand. So that's really how it started. I didn't know it was going to be a book for about 5 years. And then I was giving a whole 3-day course on it at a Baha'i winter school, and a historian there, Richard Thomas, heard one of my presentations, and he said, you know, you have a book. And I said, really? Do you think so? And he said, yeah, I really think you do. He said, I think that your research is solid enough. Yes. And coming from a professor of history, I paid some attention to that. So that's when I began writing seriously, and it still took me about another 4 years.
Wow. Well, it's a wonderful book. I have enjoyed it thoroughly.
Well, thank you.
Now, as we think about Abraham, people are familiar with the Judeo-Christian idea of Abraham being the father of those two faiths via, as he was the father of Isaac, whose mother was Sarah.
Right.
And Ishmael's mother was Hagar, and from him came the Islamic religion.
That's right.
But now you have said 3.
That's right. I know that's always the sad thing. When I say 3 wives, people are quite sure there's Sarah, and many people remember Hagar.
Yes.
But then we come to Keturah, and everyone says, wait a minute, I've never heard of her. But I say, well, if you'll open your book to Genesis, you will indeed find her name there. And it says, indeed, after Sarah died, Abraham took a 3rd wife, and her name was Keturah. So that's where we get her. And her story is a fascinating one, because she didn't have just one son, she had 6. And their lineages are all followed in the Bible, which I think makes it clear that there's some importance to what she did. Yes. That they should be taken seriously. So what we find as we follow the generations down through history is that Baha'u'llah is descended from Keturah. And so that's one of the ways in which we consider the Baha'i faith to be an Abrahamic religion. Now, the other side of the story is that Baha'u'llah was also descended from Sarah, which through a complicated series of events that involves Cyrus the Great, who, of course, was the Zoroastrian king who came across and conquered what was really the land of Canaan at that point in time. Through him, through his concubine, came a line from Sarah that eventually ended up leading to Baha'u'llah as well. So Baha'u'llah is actually descended from 2 of the wives. Now, what we know from modern genetics is that actually all of us are probably descended from all of the wives, because that's the way genetics go. So in a way, there's no tail at all. But on the other hand, it's fascinating that families from generation to generation kept track of from whom they had descended. And so when you go and look at the families who claim that they've descended from Sarah or from Hagar, the tribes that were associated with descent from Keturah, you realize how important it's been to people down through the ages to at least have this feeling that they directly connected to a link in the past. So on the one hand, it doesn't matter at all, and on the other hand, it is a fulfillment, really, of the prophecy that that Abraham would be so important to all of us, that the whole earth would be blessed through him.
Right. And I know from the Christian perspective that the promised one is also to be a descendant from David, and which, as I understand it, the woman who was married to Cyrus was like a granddaughter, I think, of David.
She was a descendant of David, that's right. It was Rahab was her name. She was taken as a consort, really, of Cyrus the Great. And her brother, Zerubbabel, was sent back to supervise the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem. Yes. But Rahab decided to stay with Cyrus. And so their son ended up being the progenitor of a line of Sasanian kings. And it is from that line that Baha'u'llah descends. So then that all traces back, as you said, through Rahab to David.
Isn't it fascinating?
It's overwhelming. I need a chart in front of me at all times. I tend to lose my way.
There's a book that was written by a man here in Illinois, Phil Turner, he has an outline in the back of his book of these descendants from Abraham. And it is really so fascinating. But truly, people who are looking for proof that Baha'u'llah is who he says he is, this is important.
That's right. For some people, it's extremely important. For other people, they feel that really the spiritual nature of Baha'u'llah's message is what's important. So I think we all have things that fascinate us. But there's no arguing with the fact that we all are interested in who our parents were and our grandparents and our great-grandparents. And so, yes, if we can trace the messengers of God back to certain lineages, it becomes this fascinating, I call it a soap opera, a spiritual soap opera that we've all been watching for about 4,000 years now.
And all those begats in the Bible have a reason for being there.
That's the fascinating thing, isn't it? They do have a reason, and as we
boring
begin
as they are.
Yes. Well, they are boring until you realize that they really lead to the other faiths.
Yes.
That they weren't just ends in themselves, that certain of those begats lead to Islam, and some of the other begats lead to Baha'u'llah and to the Bab. So I think that's the fascinating thing, as you say, that we find that these begats from a couple of millennia ago actually are coming to fruition at this point in time.
Right.
Yeah, interesting stuff.
We never know in our own lineage what will my place in history be somewhere down the way. Insignificant at the moment, but who knows what the future holds in each of our lineages, you know?
Well, it's terrifying. Sometimes I found out recently that I'm descended from the brother of one of the witches who was killed at Salem.
Oh, wow.
She was the last witch killed. Her name was Rebecca Nurse, and she's the one about whom the play The Crucible was written.
Really?
Really. So, and I didn't realize that until just very recently when I was going through some family things with one of my cousins. And he said, "Oh, by the way, do you know the story of?" And I said, "No."
So there's, okay, we took care of 3 wives. Now, 5 religions. Okay, we're talking about Christianity, Judaism, Islam, the Baha'i faith. Now, we say there are 5 religions, and that 5th religion, I have a feeling you probably get questions about that.
Well, I do. Most people have not really heard of the Bahá'í faith because its period of time was so short. The Bab really played the same role in the history of the Baha'i faith as John the Baptist played in the Christian faith.
Right.
The difference being that the Bab actually founded a new religion whose whole purpose was to recognize the next messenger of God who would come very, very soon after the Babs died. So the Bab's period of ministry was just a short 6 years?
Yeah.
6 years or 9 years? Let's see, 6 years, I think.
I think so.
But he announced his mission in 1844 and said that he made several changes to what people believed in at that time, that he changed the direction in which people say their turned to say their prayers. He gave food laws, marriage laws, as all the messengers of God have done. But because the period of his ministry was so brief, and because then when Baha'u'llah announced that he was the manifestation foretold by the Bab just a few years later, then the Bahá'í faith really never had time to grow into a large religion. And today there are few, if any, Babis left in the world because they all became Baha'is. So you have to look it up and read the history. The Bab is spelled B-A-B. His name meant the gate because he opened the way for Baha'u'llah to enter spiritually and announce his mission as the manifestation of God for this period of time.
Well, and, I was thinking today about this, that as you say, in a sense, he takes the same place as the forerunner, as John the Baptist to Christ, and yet Baha'u'llah made very specific emphasis on the importance of the Bab's role, that he was a manifestation, and that should not be downplayed in any way, and to the point where Baha'u'llah determined where the body of the Bab should be laid to rest, which is on Mount Carmel in this beautiful, beautiful temple shrine, because to him this was important. When you go to Haifa, you can see that just immediately, whereas actually Baha'u'llah's shrine is in a more obscure place, in a building that originally had been a house. And so it's interesting, the emphasis that Baha'u'llah made on the Bab, that we not forget his importance, his role as a manifestation of God. So, I got to thinking about that today as I was thinking about talking to you this evening. So, yeah, we really have to keep in mind that this fifth religion is important, even though it was brief. Without it, we would not have the Baha'i faith.
That's true, yeah. And it's fascinating to realize that if you want to read about what happened to the Bab and to his followers, you can do so in the newspapers of the time. Because after the Bab announced his mission as a messenger of God and people began turning to him for spiritual guidance and became followers, it happened so rapidly and grew in such great numbers that the clergy became outraged in Iran, and in the Ottoman Empire at that point in time, but in the area that we now call Iran, and began persecuting the followers of the Bab. Many of them were jailed, others were tortured, numbers were killed, perhaps as many as 20,000. And so you can go back and read in the London papers, in the Australian papers, reports from foreign correspondents about what is happening, the atrocities that are happening in this new religion. And I think that's so interesting that we actually now have the reports of other independent observers starting in the 1840s about what's going on in the rise of a new religion, something that we really don't have for any of the previous religions in the same way.
That's right. As I recall, there was an article that was written after the death of the Bab, after he was killed, that there was one of the actresses that was well known at that time actually wanted to put on a play about him. I don't know whether that actually came to be or not.
We're talking about Sarah Bernhardt.
That's right.
Yes. I had heard that too. It never happened, but yes, she was entranced by the story. Had you heard that, Shaun?
No, I'd never heard that before.
Yeah, well, two of us have read it somewhere. We'll have to look it up and see if we're right.
But as you said, we live in a day that even then, 172 years ago, that there were people from Europe there witnessing these things and writing about them so that we can go back. And that is just a fascinating thing, you know, that this is all where we can see pictures, we can see what people saw and wrote about it at the time. And so that's really fascinating. So you've written other books also, haven't you?
Well, I have. I started out, as I mentioned earlier, I think that I used to write about gardening for the local newspaper. So I did one book on gardening, which was a month-by-month guide to what to do in our particular climate, which is a Zone 7B for all you gardeners out there, where we can grow gardenias, yes, and camellias. And that was published by the newspaper and became a bestseller as among garden books in South Carolina and parts of North Carolina and Georgia. So that was a lot of fun. But then after I stopped writing, after 20 years, I stopped writing for the paper. I finally decided I didn't want to write about another marigold, and I was done. No more daisies for me. Then I started looking at other things, and that's when I began writing the book about Abraham. And after that, I also wrote a book called Bahá'í Basics, which is questions and answers. Because as I mentioned, when I was in high school, I was the only Bahá'í in town. And when I went to college at Duke University, I was the only Bahá'í on campus, except I think when I was a junior, one other Bahá'í joined the crowd, as it were. So there were two of us. And so
What a crowd.
That's right. So then we were always answering questions. You can imagine, what about this? Well, what about that? Well, what do you think about this? So I wrote Bahá'í Basics out of all the questions that people have asked me. And of course, as I wrote it, I thought, well, I'm so glad that people ask me all those questions because now I have a book to write.
Yes. You know what people were thinking about. That's intriguing.
Well, it is, because the longer you're a Baha'i, the more you take for granted a certain point of view. And it's only other people's questions that can jolt you out of your complacency and really make you think. You know, don't you find that, Shaun, to be true?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Exact same experience where it's like, I don't really know. Sometimes I don't know what I believe until I have somebody ask me what I believe. And then I can say, well, this and this and this and this. And then it's like, wow, you know, I guess there really isn't any other way to have known that other than to have read that in a Baha'i text. And I just would have taken it so for granted that everybody would know this idea that I wouldn't know that it came from there. And so it's good to help. For me, it helps to get those questions. It helps me to understand what it is that's distinctive about our beliefs, distinctive about our faith.
Yes, I agree. I love people who ask questions.
Yes.
That is so neat. Well, Francis, we are so glad that you've been with us for this interview. It has just really been interesting, intriguing, and just I think we have both enjoyed it.
She's so polite. What can we say? It was a treat to be here.
Oh, great. So, Francis, thank you so much for being here with us today. This has just been really intriguing to hear about the book and your experiences as a Baha'i.
Well, I've been glad to be here. And as we've mentioned so many times in this program already, thank you for asking me questions because I love them.
One more time, what is the name of your book?
It is Abraham, One God, Three Wives, Five Religions.
By Frances Worthington.
Oh, yes, that woman. I know her.
Okay, we will be reading from the Baha'i writings as we finish off the program. Hope that you will join us in that.
Oh, well, thank you. I'd love to.
O Son of Glory, be swift in the path of holiness and enter the heaven of communion with me. Cleanse thy heart with the burnish of the Spirit and hasten to the court of the Most High. O Son of Glory, be swift in the path of holiness and enter the heaven of communion with me. Cleanse thy heart with the burnish of the Spirit and hasten to the court of the Most High. swift in the path of holiness, and enter the heaven of communion with me. Cleanse thy heart with the burnish of the Spirit, and hasten to the court of the Most High. O Son of Glory, be swift in the path of holiness, and enter the heaven of communion with me. Cleanse thy heart with the burnish of the Spirit, and hasten to the court of the Most High. Hasten to the court of the Most High.
Verily, all things were immersed in the sea of purification, when, on that first day of Rizwan, we shed upon the whole of creation the splendors of our most excellent names and our most exalted attributes. This verily is a token of my loving providence, which hath encompassed all the worlds. Baha'u'llah.
My God, my adored one, my King, my desire, what tongue can voice my thanks to thee? I was heedless, thou didst awaken me. I had turned back from thee, thou didst graciously aid me to turn towards thee. I was as one dead, thou didst quicken me with the water of life. I was withered, thou didst revive me with the heavenly stream of thine utterance, which hath flowed forth from the pen of the All-Merciful. Baha'u'llah.
Say, the most great festival is indeed the King of festivals. Call ye to mind, O people, the bounty which God hath conferred upon you. Ye were sunk in slumber, and lo, he aroused you by the reviving breezes of his revelation, and made known unto you his manifest and undeviating path. Baha'u'llah.
Glad tidings, the morn of guidance hath dawned, the sun of reality hath shone forth, the breeze of favor hath wafted. Glad tidings, the sun of the supreme horizon hath radiated to all the world with boundless effulgence. Glad tidings, the hearts are all in the utmost purity. Glad tidings, it is the splendor of His Holiness Baha. Glad tidings, Zion is dancing. Glad tidings, the kingdom of God is full of exhilaration and commotion. Abdu'l-Baha.
This is the day whereon the ocean of God's mercy hath been manifested unto men, the day in which the clouds of His bountiful favor have overshadowed the whole of mankind. Now is the time to cheer and refresh the downcast through the invigorating breeze of love and fellowship, and the living waters of friendliness and charity. Baha'u'llah.
Arise and proclaim unto the entire creation tidings that He who is the All-Merciful hath directed His steps toward the Rizwan and entered it. Guide then the people unto the garden of delight, which God hath made the throne of His paradise. We have chosen thee to be our most mighty trumpet, whose blast is to signalize the resurrection of all mankind. Baha'u'llah.
We've been on the road since 44. A long time to be going. On the road and looking for the chorus of the dawn. The chorus of the dawn. Armed with only gentleness, calling day and night, guided in the wilderness by a pen dipped in light, by a pen dipped in light. With a fire in our belly and a lantern in our hand, combing every alleyway, searching every land, welcoming more singers to the band, welcoming more singers to the band. Some pioneered to far-off shores, some not far from home. Everyone a clarion, raising up the song, raising up the song. Some went to the jungle tracks, to the villages and inns. Some went round the earth and back, to every settlement, to every settlement. With a fire in our belly and a lantern in our hand, combing every alleyway, searching every land, welcoming more singers to the band, welcoming more singers to the band. We've been on the road since 44. A long time to be going. You might think we're slowing down, but we've only just begun. We have only just begun. We got a fire in our belly and a lantern in our hand, combing every alleyway, searching every land, welcoming more singers to the band,
I was but a man like others, asleep upon my couch, when lo, the breezes of the All-Glorious were wafted over me, and taught me the knowledge of all that hath been. This thing is not from me, but from one who is almighty and all-knowing. His all-compelling summons hath reached me, and caused me to speak his praise amidst all people. I was indeed as one dead when his behest was uttered. The hand of the will of thy Lord, the compassionate, the merciful, transformed me. Baha'u'llah.
Rejoice with exceeding gladness, O people of Baha, as ye call to remembrance the day of supreme felicity, the day whereon the tongue of the Ancient of Days hath spoken, as he departed from his house, proceeding the spot from which he shed upon the whole of creation the splendors of his name, the All-Merciful. Baha'u'llah.
Verily I say, this is the day which mankind can behold the face and hear the voice of the Promised One. The call of God hath been raised, and the light of his countenance hath been lifted upon all men. It behooveth every man to blot out the trace of every idle word from the tablet of his heart, and to gaze with an open and unbiased mind on the signs of his revelation, the proofs of his mission, and the tokens of his glory. Baha'u'llah.
Consider the mercy of God and his gifts. He enjoineth upon you that which shall profit you, though he himself can well dispense with all creatures. Your evil doings can never harm us, neither can your good works profit us. We summon you wholly for the sake of God. Baha'u'llah.
Armed with the power of thy name, nothing can ever hurt me, and with thy love in my heart, all the world's afflictions can in no wise alarm me. Armed with the power of thy name, nothing can ever hurt me, and with thy love in my heart, nothing can ever hurt me, and with thy power of thy name, nothing can ever hurt me, and with thy power of thy name, nothing can ever hurt me, and with thy power of thy name, nothing can ever hurt me, and with thy love in thy name, nothing can ever hurt me, and with thy love in thy name, nothing can ever hurt me, and with thy love in thy name, nothing can ever hurt me, and with thy love in thy name, nothing can ever hurt me, and with thy love in thy name, nothing can ever hurt me, and with thy love in thy name, nothing can ever hurt me. Armed with the power of thy name, armed with the power of thy name, armed with the power of thy name.
To find out more about Baha'i events taking place in Champaign-Urbana, or if you'd like to listen to previous NewLamp programs, you can go online to www.cu-bahai.org. Or if you would like to learn more about the Baha'i national and international community, go to www.bahai.us. Thank you again for joining us today. I hope you'll join us again next month. Goodbye.
Thanks for listening to this week's Weekend Heartbeat on WEFT Champaign 90.1 FM, Community Radio, Champaign-Urbana, Illinois, streaming live at www.weft.org.